have quite a laundry list of accomplishments here, so bear with me here. Kevin Freeman is considered one of the world's leading experts on the issues of economic warfare and financial terrorism. He has consulted for and briefed members of the U.S. House and Senate, present and past CIA, DIA, FBI, SEC, Homeland Security, the Department of Justice, as well as local and state law enforcement. His research has been presented in critical DoD studies on economic warfare, Iran, and weapons of mass destruction, presented to the Secretary of Defense and the Undersecretary of Defense Intelligence. He has traveled extensively with research trips to Russia and China and throughout Europe and the Americas. He is also a senior fellow at the Center of Security Policy and a contributing editor to the Counter-Terrorist magazine. That's a mouthful. I am absolutely pleased to present Kevin Freeman.
It's always a pleasure to speak someplace where I can go home that night and get in my own bed and see my kids and kiss them goodnight. And I've had that privilege. On Saturday, I spoke in Washington, D.C. I actually went with my wife, and we took her father on an honor flight for Vietnam veterans. And then on Sunday, we had a private tour of the Capitol, got to walk out on the Speaker's balcony and see all of that. We flew back late Sunday night, got home early Monday, and then on Tuesday I had the opportunity to speak or was it Tuesday? It's all this side of town. It was at the Hope Center Tuesday, and then yesterday I spoke at the Frisco Golf Club, and then here. So it's all this side of town, but at least I get to go home every night and sleep at home. So it's a privilege to be here. What we're going to talk about are a few things. The first one, first let me give just a brief history. Brief history is that I've studied financial terrorism. My background is financial advisor. I'm not an expert, I'm kind of a generalist, but there are so very few people that focus on financial terrorism that I get called an expert. And so I'm privileged to share with you for that. I've done work for the Pentagon, as was mentioned. I've written a few books on the subject. And then I had a media introduction, and I've had the privilege of being on Megyn Kelly's program and CNBC and Fox and Friends and Lou Dobbs and Glenn Beck and 700 Club with Pat Robertson and Jewish Voice of Victory and C-SPAN and Harry probably about 100 different television programs. And we're announcing a new television program that will be coming out this summer on the Blaze Network. It will be titled Economic War Room with Kevin Freeman. I want to tell you a little about the show and how it relates to the topic I was asked to talk about. Every show that we do is going to follow one single outline, and my talk tonight follows the same outline. You've heard of the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? Well, our show is going to follow the bad, the good, and the beautiful. We're going to talk about the threat, the bad things. The good things are how we can address the threat. And the beautiful is going to make sure that we don't put our treasure just in our money. Our treasure should be in our liberty. Our treasure should be in our family. Our treasure should be in heaven, our relationship with God and our relationship with other people. And so while we're going to be talking about some pretty nasty, bad financial threats that we face, we're also going to be talking about ways to remediate those, and then why ultimately our trust should be in God or in liberty and our future. So we're going to talk about a lot of topics on the show. Tonight, I'm going to talk about the globalist war on cash. We'll also talk a little bit about growing national debt and what happens when interest rates rise, and the risk of a stock market correction, which may be the title of my next book, George Soros and the Stock Market Crash of 2020, I think might be the title. And that will be based on Mr. Soros and his intention of manipulating the economy and so forth. There's some good news, and I'll share good news I bring back from Washington, and we'll talk about something that I think is beautiful. So when we talk about a war, we talk about a war against all enemies, foreign and domestic. there are enemies outside the United States, and the last time I was here was several years ago, and I talked about China and Russia and their intention to do harm to us, and their intention to do harm to us through cyber economic means. And in fact, if you had a computer that was unpatched with Windows XP, there's the possibility that you had the WannaCry virus pop up and tell you that you can't access your files anymore. They've all been encrypted unless you pay $300 worth of Bitcoin. So there are enemies that are foreign enemies. There are domestic enemies too. And I think it's been kind of interesting to watch President Obama set up his own version of a war room in Washington so he can take down the Trump presidency. And Secretary Clinton has said basically the same thing. We're here to take down this presidency. But we have enemies around the world. And I list a few here, Muslim Brotherhood and others that I think are threats to our economic well-being. And we'll talk about all those on the show. And each show will have a topic. For example, the show, we might talk about the war on cash, which is what I'm going to talk about here. Why? Why is there a war on cash? Why does anybody have anything wrong with me piling up? If I want to earn plenty to stack $100 bills, why can't I earn it and keep it in my house? Well, there's several reasons. Security, opportunity, terrorism, and then I'll mention other. Well, from a security standpoint, we know North Korea has been printing $100 bills like crazy. They've done it for years, and we know that there's counterfeiting that takes place. Paper money is not all that secure. It can be stolen, it can be counterfeited, and it can be counterfeited quite well. So security is a reason that people want to remove cash. Opportunity is another reason. Every time you make a change, you can make some money. Or it could be the opportunity of Bitcoin or something like that. So I'll talk about that. Apple, I don't have any problem. I use Apple Pay. I go to the Quick Trip and I get my iced tea. And, I would never swipe a credit card for $1.50, but I'll just blink on the Apple Pay and do it. And it's just extremely convenient. So it could be an opportunity of convenience. Terrorism is another reason. Terrorists trade in paper money. So do drug dealers. And because of that, the government says we need to stop this. For example, bin Laden had pinned inside of his coat a 500 euro note. And a lot of people carry around $100 bills and they use them for nefarious things. Drug deals are done in cash, and you've all seen the captured cash from the drug dealer. It's piled high in big piles. But the other one is the one that concerns me the most, and that's the issue of control. Right now, I'm tracked right now. How many people in here have a cell phone? You're all tracked. Every single one of you. If you have a computer or a cell phone, you're tracked. And if you use a credit card, you're tracked in your purchases. But when you use cash, you're less tracked. You might be caught on the retailer's cameras, and then the facial recognition technology could find you. But it's possible, if you have cash, to go in and buy a burner phone or a GoPro or something like that. Use cash for it, buy ministry cash, call somebody, and not be continuously monitored. Slowly but surely, technology is advancing and taking away our liberty, our ability to be anonymous. There's good things about that, because I like it when they're able to track criminals. The problem is when they've defined a criminal as someone who's doing otherwise lawful activity. The problem is when they've defined terrorists as being domestic, like veterans and Tea Party members and things like that. It wasn't long ago that the IRS was demanding, I don't know, do you have a 501c3 and did it go through?
It's a C4 and we're still suing them. So.
You're still suing. You know how many times my name, because I've spoken to 150 or 200 Tea Parties. We want to know every speaker you've ever had, and you have to tell us. What books do you have in your library? Things like that. I mean, right now, government intrusion into our lives is excessive. And if we eliminate cash, it will become even more excessive. Well, one of the problems that we're facing is that 34% of Europeans and 38% of Americans are already willing to go cash-free for their lives. And about a quarter of people in Europe and the United States do so already. Now, I want to point out some statistics that I just pulled up on my phone while I stopped and ate dinner, because it makes it more efficient to drive over before the traffic hits. You know, if I left at 4, I got here at 5. If I left at 5, I got here at 6:45. You know, so I just went ahead and came over and ate the Genghis Grill, which was quite good, and they were nice to let me sit there and surf the internet and read my Bible study and do that sort of thing. But here's a declaration of war on cash. It's money.visualcapitalist.com, and it goes around the world, and it says policymakers are pushing to abolish $50 and $100 notes, and that's true in the United States. In Venezuela, the government has banned the 100 Bolivar note, which is, by the way, worth nothing in Venezuela at this point. The European Central Bank has stopped producing new 500 euro notes. Distribution will stop entirely by 2018. France has considered banning cash for transactions over 1,000 euros. Greece now requires that their citizens declare all cash over 15,000 euros held privately in their safe or non-bank storage. They force you to declare what you have in your safe. Norway, DNB, Norway's biggest bank, has proposed a ban on cash. Sweden has started removing all ATMs from rural areas. Singapore has eliminated the $10,000 note, its highest note. South Korea aims to eliminate paper money entirely by 2020. Australia proposes a ban on the $100 bill. And India actually took out their 500 and 1,000 rupee notes out of circulation, and if you wanted to use them, you had to exchange them. And at the same time, we see an incredible rise in Bitcoin prices. Anybody here follow Bitcoin? Have any Bitcoin? If you put $100 into Bitcoin in 2010, it would be nominally worth $73 million today. Now, do you know what's behind the Bitcoin? Encryption. That's it. Absolutely nothing. There's no gold back there. There's no full faith and credit of any government behind it. It's encryption. It's the ability to have, and it's not the only digital currency. There's others, and the others are rising in value as well. There's a scarcity because people want the ability to have anonymity to transfer something from one place to another. It's also turned into recently kind of a Ponzi scheme because it was like up 100% in the last week. It got to $2,700, and then it was down $350 at one point while I was sitting at dinner, and I think it bounced back a little bit. This is not what money should do to be effective. Money shouldn't bounce around in its value relative to goods and services. You want money to have a certain stability. But it is an amazing technology. So amazing that my friend Patrick Byrne, who owns Overstock.com, has decided they want to issue securities. That which you own of Overstock, either debt or equity that you have with Overstock, would be issued in the blockchain, the technology behind Bitcoin. So it's amazing technology. But I can tell you that money should not go from $100 in value in 2010 to be $73 million 7 years later. There's some positives associated with Bitcoin. It can be exchanged anonymously, and it has opportunity to use. The negatives of Bitcoin, it's anonymous, and governments don't want that. And you have the opportunity, it's a loss of control and reward for the government. Recently, Bitcoin has just skyrocketed because there have been some changes in China, and the Chinese citizens have thought, how can I move money and get it out of the country? And that's one way that they can do it, is they buy it. But it has a limited supply. That could be its advantage for money, is it doesn't grow like the money supply. But the disadvantage of it is that there's such a scarcity of it that people that are buying into it drive the price up. So India's talked about banning cash, and they have eliminated the 500,000 rupee notes, which were worth between $7.50 and $15 at the time, and they banned them late at the end of 2016. And those notes represented 20% of the cash value in circulation and 80% of cash outstanding. Estimates have been that the underground economy is about 20 to 25% of the total economy. So the Indian government said, we got to stop this. We got to get control of this. And people are doing all these cash transactions, so we're going to eliminate these popular 500,000 rupee notes. The problem is it created enormous upheaval in society. And so you had some wealthy people that had saved up a lot of cash, and they were begging their servants to go exchange them and turn them in because the government was limiting the amount that you could exchange and turn in. That's an experiment that we're still watching. It appears that the society is adjusted and they're continuing to use cash today. So that's something that we're watching. I'd like to recommend to you the reason that I think that we're moving to a cashless world, right or wrong, agree or disagree. And I wrote it in a magazine article titled Tactics and Preparedness. And if you'd like to get a copy of this, A Cashless World and How It Will Affect You, go to secretweapon.org and go to our newsroom and go back to, you'll have to, it's not on the first page because all my interviews we put chronologically in there. So you go and you look at those interviews and then you go previous entries at the bottom and click on that and you go back 2 or 3 pages, I'm guessing. But you get to August 2016, August of last year, and you can read this article, A Cashless World. But I'm going to share with you some of the reasons that I think we're going. You know, we started as a cashless world. Cash is something that men created, that we invented. It's paper, right? At least in this modern form. So I've got a $20 bill here. It's just a piece of paper with some pretty ink and a picture of a dead president, right? Not my favorite dead president, Andrew Jackson. I don't mind the bill so much, but I don't really particularly care for his politics. But nevertheless, dead president's worth about $20, and everybody in this room agrees that it's worth $20. And even if I gave you a shiny coin that looked gold and had Susan B. Anthony's picture on it, well, I like Susan B. Anthony, and I think that would be a cool comparison. We all agree that this one bill is worth maybe 20 of those, right? They just have a general understanding. That's the value of money. And when I talk about money, I'm not going to distinguish between, there are technical distinctions between currency and cash and money, but I'm just going to talk about in general. As a general idea, we needed money because how else are you going to have ways to value the difference between a cow and a bushel of wheat when you want to do some exchange and you want to get some product, somebody has some gasoline and you want to exchange? Well, money helps you measure it and it gives you something in common that we can all exchange. And that's why we all commonly agree that this piece of paper, at one time, that piece of paper was a note that you could take in and you could exchange for precious metals. You can't do that anymore. But we still operate. It still operates as money. So we went from a cashless world to a world which operates in cash. And we did it because of the benefits of what money can do. Money is good for us because it's portable. It's easy to transport. It's permanent or indestructible. It doesn't just disappear. You can stack up bills and they're not truly permanent. They can be burned up, but they're reasonably permanent. They're divisible. I can make change. Back in the back, I've got some of my books, Secret Weapon. If you want to buy a book and you've got an Andrew Jackson bill and you want $10 back for it, because I'm charging $10, pull $10 out of the jar and stick $20 in. It's divisible. There's some $5 bills back there too. You can just take 2 5s, take 1 10, stick a 20 in. It's divisible. It's homogeneous, meaning it has the same basic value. When I was in Washington, my bills worked the same in Washington as they do here in Collin County. And they work the same as they would in Honolulu, Hawaii. Frankly, anywhere around the world, they have the same basic ability. And they're easily recognized for what they are. So paper money has a lot of advantages. Paper money solved the first problem. We have a cashless society, and paper money solves that problem. It gives us the ability to exchange things and to keep track and to know what you've got. It's a store of value. But it created its own problems. Problem number 2 is that even paper money in the least normal denominations of $100 or less becomes pretty bulky for exchange at some point. So what do you do? I mean, you're going to go buy a car, and let's say you picked out a really nice car, it's $47,000. You're going to really carry in $47,000 briefcases full of cash? Is that really the smartest, best thing to do? No, of course not. And so what you do is you put them in the bank, and then you write a check, right? That's what we do. You deposit it in the bank, and you write a check. And so it solved a problem. But it created another problem, is that when the banks get your money, that they start loaning money out, and we start having fractional banking. And you all know what fractional banking is. And you realize that if you put, I remember I had a startup company in Monterey, California. And we were raising a capital round of $5 million. And we had an investor pull out. And we thought, what are we going to do? We need $5 million. And jokingly, we said, well, there's First National Bank of Carmel Valley. We could go rob it. And the answer was, no, actually, we couldn't. We could have taken every dime they had in that bank, and probably every dime they had in every bank on the peninsula, and not gotten our $5 million. Banks just don't have the money there, right? They loan it out. Or if you watch It's a Wonderful, it's in your house, and your house, and your house. They don't keep the money. So we have fractional banking. And that becomes electronic. And what happens is we've made it really easy to borrow money. And debt has become very simple. And so now I have several credit cards here. There's two of them. There's a MasterCard and an American Express, and then there's another MasterCard, and we keep credit cards. And you can run up credit, and you can borrow money. We've made it easier to borrow money, which has created a problem for us individually. It's created a problem for our government, because our government no longer has to back the money that it issues with anything, and so the government is borrowing money, right? And the government is borrowing, I'll tell you about this in a minute, $20 trillion. Flat out, $20 trillion. And American debt is higher than it's ever been, which has created another problem. And that is, the government owes $20 trillion. The entire global economy is less than $100 trillion annually. Our U.S. economy is $18 trillion. That's our GDP for a year. That's a lot of debt we have. So what do? Well, we'll have to sell it to the public, but the public doesn't have that much money. Well, we'll sell it to foreign governments, and you'll see in a moment that foreign governments aren't necessarily able to buy all of that. Oh, I think I figured it out. We'll let the Federal Reserve buy it. And the Federal Reserve will buy it. What will they do when they buy all of that debt? Well, they're going to do quantitative easing. And you know what? We're going to jumpstart this economy. We'll just drive interest rates down. Now, in the United States, we've had basically positive interest rates all along, but the Japanese haven't. They went into negative interest rates. They bought so much debt that people have to pay money to have their money held in the bank. Right? That's a problem. You have to pay money for the bank to take your deposit. Whoa, what is that? I'm used to getting money. I want to be paid for my savings. And you're making me pay to save money? That's wrong. So how do we solve that problem? Well, people solve that problem very easily. They take their money out of the banks.
Right.
And when they take the money out of the banks, what went up in Tokyo faster than any other thing? The highest growing sale of a product in Tokyo was safes that people could put their money in so that they didn't have to pay interest. Pay interest to loan money. It doesn't make sense. And the government looks down and the government says, whoa, all the money's exiting the banking system. We need to eliminate cash so we can drive it back into the banking system. And this is the procedure why I believe the true war on cash exists, is because of negative interest rates and the fact that people wanted to pull their money out of the system, and you can't be controlled if you don't have your money in the system. That's why drug dealers and terrorists keep their money out of the system. It keeps them away from the government's prying eyes. Because what happens if it's in the bank? If the bank fails, did you know that your investments, your dollars that you deposit in the bank are not your dollars anymore? You have made a loan to the bank, and the bank owns that. And they have a debt to you, which can be wiped out in the case of a bank failure. And so you get back 50 cents on the dollar, or 25 cents, or 75 cents, but it is not your money any longer. once it's deposited in the banking system. That's the reason you might, oh, you think, well, I'll solve that, I'll put it in a safe deposit box in the bank. Guess what? That's not legal. You can't. You're not allowed to. Now, I have a friend who owns a storage company, and he's under the storage laws creating ability to have very safe storage that's essentially a safety deposit box with insurance and guarantees and other things. You can put cash there, but you can't put cash in a safety deposit box. So what all of this means is everybody's being driven into the banking system, and when you're in the banking system, you can be controlled. You can be tracked. Your money can be accessed. It can even come to the point where we're not finding enough buyers for our U.S. government bonds, so we're just going to mandate that all retirement accounts have to be at least 50% government bonds for their own safety. These are not unusual things. These things have happened around the world in collapsing financial economies. So I believe that is the reason that we're seeing a war on cash. And I believe it's also the reason that we're seeing this crazy move into Bitcoin. And here's an article I pulled. Here's the rational analysis why 99% of current Bitcoin owners will never be able to sell Bitcoins for anything close to its imagined current value. Have any of you thought about buying Bitcoin? A few of you? Let me tell you, here's the problem with Bitcoin. Because there's nothing behind it, its price is determined by buyers and sellers exclusively. Now that's true in the stock market. Anybody here own stocks? That's true in the stock market. Every company, its price is determined by the buyers or sellers. But in the short run, that's true. In the long run, it's determined by the profits and earnings of the corporation. Because at some point, if you had a company that was earning $5 a share, and you knew they were earning, and they get dividended out, and sellers drove the price down to $2 a share, but you knew they were still earning $5 a share every year, who among us wouldn't rush out and buy it? There's some intrinsic value to that earnings stream. Bitcoin doesn't have that. So this is potentially a problem. I don't know if I agree with everything that the writer here is saying, but I will tell you that there's a risk that it's a giant Ponzi scheme. And that's the argument he's making. And he, by the way, loves the technology, thinks it's fantastic. He'd love to see it do something like I would love to see it, which is keep track of your Texas gold held in deposits in a vault here in Texas with the issue of Texans. Now let me tell you something Bitcoin does have going for it. Australia just deemed it legal currency, which means it is not being taxed for capital gains. Now that's exciting, and Japan is now accepting it as currency. If we could get Texas gold, imagine this, to where there wasn't a capital gain or loss on it when you bought it, it was Texas money, which by the way, we can. We can do that. The state of Texas, Glenn Hagar has the opportunity to set this up. The law allows it, the framework is there. Then we need to sue, and we need to have Ken Paxton, Attorney General Paxton, sue the IRS for taxing constitutionally provided money, which is Texas gold, because the Constitution says that no state shall create anything other than gold and silver coins, and we just want electronic evidence of gold and silver coins, issue them as Texans, operated on the blockchain technology to where you can carry around a card that was secure that says this is how much you've got, and you don't have to pay capital gains when gold goes up or gold goes down. That's my ideal. That's what I would love to see as money, and I think we're reasonably close to having the structure to be able to do that. I mean, in my lifetime, I expect to see that issued by Texans. So what do you do about this? What do you do about the war on cash? Well, first, I'm going to tell you, don't give up on cash entirely. You ought to have a stash of it. You ought to carry a stash of it. You need to have cash. Even if we went into a massive inflation where cash became worthless at some point, for now you need cash. And I'll use the example, I've used it before and you may have heard it. In a tsunami, you know what happens. Water just rushes in and covers everything and floods everything. But that's not what happens first. What happens first is the water all recedes. And then it comes flooding. And every example we've seen around the world where currencies have collapsed, there's been a shortage of cash that happened first. It's just the nature of the beast. And you want to have cash in case, God forbid, there were something horrible like an EMP or a long-term power outage or whatever. You don't want to have everything digitally. Everything digitally can be hacked. Even the Bitcoin wallets can be hacked. You don't want everything digital. You want to have some level of cash. And it depends on your personal needs, which we keep cash in a safe in the house. The second thing you need to be aware of is that we could very easily slip into inflation or deflation based on what I'm going to tell you next. And the last thing I'll tell you is even when they tried to shut down the use of the large rupee notes, 80% of transactions in India as of May still use cash. So what do you do about it? Be aware, but keep some cash. So the second topic I said we talk about is why we're vulnerable, which is the debt that we've accumulated. I don't know if you realize this, but from September 5th, 2015, I spoke in San Diego, and I pulled up the debt at the time, and it was $18.1 trillion, and that's at usdebtclock.org. I looked at it a couple of days ago, and it was $19.9 million. We're about a year and a half since September 2015. In a year and a half, we've increased our debt about $1.8 trillion. That's not being reported. In fact, they're telling you that, oh, well, the deficit is just this, and it's measured in a few $100 million. No, it's almost $1 trillion a year that we've been running up our debt. And the publicly held debt as a percentage of our gross domestic product is at unsustainable levels already, and it's rising rapidly. And that doesn't even include the $76 trillion of unfunded promises that our government has made that we have not set aside money for. Are there any accountants in the room? People that do accounting? Okay, generally accepted accounting principles. You promise your employees you're going to give them this retirement, and you decide you don't want to report that on your in balance sheet and income statement. What happens to you? You go to jail. That's a perp walk supreme. U.S. government does that. No congressman, no budget director, no representative of the administrations even call on it. But we owe $76 trillion in unfunded liabilities, and that's very conservative, by the way. Lawrence Kelikoff says it's $210 trillion. The whole global economy is only about $80 trillion. This is frightening, and these are the promises that politicians are making. Oh, we'll give you this, and it's Republican and Democrat. Prescription drug benefits and this and that and the other thing, the promises. And you count on them. But there's no way they're going to be paid. That's just a simple, unfortunate fact of life. There's really two possible outcomes. The third one, I guess we could say kick the can down the road, which is the politician's choice. But two real outcomes. In the long run, at some point, we're either going to have hyperinflation and a currency crisis, or we're going to have deflation and depression. And we might have one and then the other, or the other one, and they might trade off. Is there a solution? Everybody says, well, we'll just cut spending and raise taxes. Unfortunately, if you increase revenues starting in 2015, which we obviously didn't, and you raise taxes by 58.5% in 2015, or cut spending by 37.7%, that's what it would take to eliminate the fiscal gap over time. So we'd either have to cut spending by almost 40% or raise taxes by almost 60%. And the further we go along, the worse it gets. By 2025, it's a 65% tax increase or a 40% spending cut. And eventually it gets to 2045, a 77% tax increase or a 46% spending cut. This is not good news. And these are really conservative figures. This is where we're headed. You probably need to do both, and you need to do something even more important than either of those, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But don't count on foreigners rescuing us. That's the answer. Well, China will buy more debt. They'll just buy some more of it. Here's what the foreigners have been doing with our debt. Long-term treasury purchases, right about here is 2013, And in 2013, the Chinese government said we must de-Americanize the world and remove the dollar as the reserve currency of the world. We're going to start selling down. And they did, and other nations did. And so foreign long-term treasury purchases by foreign central banks have collapsed. And that's despite the fact that the dollar's gotten really strong. And our economy relative to the rest of the world is really good. Here's a problem that we're facing. George Soros.
Yeah.
The Chinese in their book Unrestricted Warfare said that the next war will be fought based on not a military strategist. It will be based on someone like George Soros. So this is the next problem that we're facing. And I said it might be my book, The Stock Market in the Election of 2020. Could say the stock market crashed in the election of 2020. Do you know what put President Obama in the White House in 2008? The financial crash. That's what did it. So, in part, we did it. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac did it, right? Who attacked Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac? Russia, and they timed it. Would they have gone down? Probably. But the Russians decided they wanted Fannie and Freddie to go down at the exact moment leading up to a stock market, or leading up to an election that year. They timed it. I want to tell you, we hear a lot these days in the press, Russia interfered in our election. Well, that's true. And they interfered in the election of 2008. That one I have proof, not smoke, proof. Smoking gun, proof. They manipulated Fannie and Freddie right before the election. On September 11th of 2008, John McCain and Sarah Palin, I would not pick John McCain as my president #1 choice, but I would pick him over the president that was elected. And on that date, McCain and Palin were leading in the polls. Lehman Brothers failed and it flipped. This is what happened in the summer of 2008. Russia purposely did a financial terror attack. I'm concerned that George Soros is aware of this fact from the Chinese. A single man-made stock market crash is a weapon. Did you know there's 100% correlation between a crash that happens in the year prior to an election and a sustained, continuing crash that happens a year prior to the election and a change in political parties in the next election? Well, we had one in 1987, right before an election, and fortunately, we recovered as an economy. It was a program trading-led crash, and it was kind of temporary. Remember the crash of 1987? It was kind of temporary. It was a little too soon. The Russians watched that and saw, well, that's too soon. If it happened maybe 6 months later, it might have been Michael Dukakis who was elected in 1988. The Russians know it. They say we can crash the economy and the stock market. That's our secret weapon. So I have good news. I told you I'd tell you about the bad. That's the bad. And all that's bad. And it's very bad. But we have good news, is that there are good things that we can do, real things that we can do to change the trajectory. And all of them are basically solid conservative policies. If you saw my book Game Plan, I wrote 8 steps. And I didn't use the term to make America great again. I borrowed that phrase. But it was 8 steps to return America to greatness. That was the title of it. It was a chapter. We need to recognize that we're in an economic war. We need to take reasonable precautions. We need to repatriate overseas earnings, achieve energy independence, reduce regulation, create a workable tax code, teach what America is all about, and return to our spiritual roots. I'm pleased to say that the Trump platform includes all 8 of these. And I've talked to people in the Trump team, and they believe them. I'm going to list 3 things, practical things that we can do, and that I believe that the administration is working on that will make a significant difference in America's trajectory. The first one is there's a push to return America to reasonable economic growth. The average growth rate for economic recovery since the 1960s is 3.9%. The Obama recovery, and this was taken a little before his term ended, his second term ended, the average GDP growth rate was 2.1%, and I think when it all leveled out, it was 1.9%. That was a very anemic recovery coming from the tremendous downturn that we'd had. We've got to get America moving again. We've got to increase our growth. So one of the things that we're doing to increase growth is we've been educating people on the cost of regulation. The growth of federal regulations over the past 6 decades has cut economic growth by an average of 2 percentage points per year. Who is the king of regulation for the last 8 years? You've seen some of the pictures, the stacks of the Federal Register of the new regulations. The average American household receives about $277,000 less annually than we would if we went back to 1950, 1960 regulation laws. So when I hear we're going to eliminate 2 for every 1 new that we bring in, that's music to my ears. We ought to have an average median household income of $330,000 and not $53,000. This is enormous. And you stop and you realize you don't start businesses because of regulation. They're complex and it's difficult and it's frustrating. People don't get paid full-time wages. They don't have full-time jobs because of regulation with Obamacare. I want to tell you the good news. The good news is in 1996, Congress voted the Congressional Review Act for bureaucratic regulations that affect any third party. And they said for all agencies of the U.S. government, every bureaucracy, every agency, if you institute a new regulation that impacts a third party, you must submit it to Congress, and we must have the ability to vote up or down on it. Single majority vote, not subject to a filibuster, 10 hours debate maximum, and we get to vote. And if we want to vote down on it, and the president signs, both houses vote no, and the president signs, it does not go into effect. Well, everybody laughed and said, well, it's the president's own bureau, the EPA, that's putting it into effect. The president can tell them not to put it into effect, right? And so they thought it was kind of meaningless. And from 1996 to to January of this year, it was used 1 time under the George W. Bush administration. 1 time. From 96 until, what is that, 21 years. Here's another feature of it, though. If the EPA is told by Congress, we thumbs down, and the president signs on it, they cannot bring that regulation again, or anything substantially similar. Well, that's kind of cool, but the president already has the ability to say, hey, don't do that to the EPA. Already can executive, got a phone and a pen, they can stop a bad regulation, right? So they just kind of ignored it. And they just blew it off. They didn't even submit the regulations to Congress for review. They just have blown it off for 20 plus years. Except some people from the Buckeye Institute brought it up to the Trump administration and said, hey, the clock you have 30 days to review it, but the clock doesn't begin until it's officially presented to Congress. And there's a whole bunch of regulations that have never been officially presented to Congress. And so from January till today, 16 regulations representing billions of dollars have been shut down. The Congress voted with majority House and majority Senate and the President's signature. And these regulations have been wiped out and they cannot be brought up again. And they've identified other regulations that they plan to take through that same route and eliminate. So there is good news. We are working on it. It's called the Congressional Review Act. And it was written up in the Hill that it's the deregulatory agenda for Trump's 2nd year. And so the president, all he has to do is say to the agency, I'm ordering you to submit that regulation that you've been imposing on people. You must submit it to Congress. Now, I'm ordering you. Get submitted. 2 houses voted down, the president signs it, can't be brought up again. It even goes around some of the Obama holdovers. It's really, really a cool thing. I was so excited. Paul Teller, you all know Paul. He was Senator Cruz's chief of staff. He is now a liaison to the White House. So I had a private meeting with him, and they're big on this, and they're working it. So that's something we can do to enhance our growth. Something else that we can do to enhance our growth is stop intellectual property theft. The Chinese have stolen something amount close to 30% of our GDP, $5 trillion per year that we have lost from IP theft. And the president has the ability to renegotiate bad trade deals, and we're trying to talk to him. Now, I wrote this book warning order. I was one author. I wrote on intellectual property theft, but another author was Dr. Peter Navarro, who is one of President Trump's top advisors on trade and China. So we're hoping that the president will get serious about this, stop it. Even reducing it would allow us to grow more rapidly. If we can get to 3% growth, which everybody's saying, oh, Trump can't get to 3%. Oh, there's no way, it's not going to happen. It can't happen. It can't happen. Yes, it can happen if you do those two things. Reduce regulation. If you also repatriate $2 trillion of corporate earnings, American companies that have earned money, that are keeping it overseas, that won't bring it home and sitting in treasury bonds overseas, you tell them, you bring it home and get it invested and get it working. You do a workable tax plan. Reduce corporate taxes. You can get 3%. You might even get 4% growth if we do these smart things. And that's the good news. I told you I'd tell you the bad news. I told you I'd tell you the good news. So how do we reach an apathetic but fearful America? That's the problem. We need to educate. Just like I heard earlier about the people that are not voting in Collin County, and so you have $600 million being spent that you can't control because people didn't show up to vote. We need to reach people. I want to do my part. I can only do a small part, but I work really hard at it. And what I'm doing as my part is introducing economic war room. I'm trying to take these down to pocketbook issues to where people will pay attention to them and they would be willing to do and call their congressman or do something about it because they're worried about their money. And so it's economic war room. And it's hoping we can get on a war footing in America because we're in a global economic war. And if we do not do something, we will find that we've lost cash. And we're a cashless society and we're under control and we've lost liberty. So we have to do something. So I'm going to show you just a 1-minute film clip. And then after that, I showed you the bad, the good. After that, I'm going to show you something that I think is beautiful. And let me share that with you. But watch this 1-minute clip. We have some of the top economists in the world. We have some of the top national security professionals that have all agreed they come on the show. I've got a list of 23 people that I took to the Blaze and said that they promised they'll support this show, put us on. We think right now it'll be Wednesday night prime time. So they said at one point Friday night, and then they said Friday night's not a big enough audience. We want to go in the middle of the week, which we're pleased of. We were far down the contracting channels, and we have a term sheet and all of that. And then they stopped for a second, and I said, why are you pulling people off? Are you against the show? No, we love the show. We want to do this. We want to do this. But that's when Bill O'Reilly left Fox, and I think they started courting Bill O'Reilly to come on to the Blaze. So watch that. I said, okay, if you get him, we want to go right after him. So we always want to leave room for hope. And we have a segment called Where's Your Treasure? We're going to talk about people that have made a lot of money or maybe haven't, but they put their treasure in something other than just money, because it's not all about money. And so one of our sponsors is Richard Uline, the Uline Company. And we'll talk about the good work that he's doing and the efforts that he's making. But Steve, you mentioned, could I show some of my wife's paintings? I'll call these the beautiful. This is called the White House in Springtime. My wife painted that in 2005 for President George W. Bush, and then we didn't feel like it was springtime for a while. We brought it back out. It's hanging out again. It was featured at the Christian inaugural Gala. This one, it's kind of light in the projector, but this is titled "And Justice for All," and that's the backside of the Supreme Court. On the frieze across the top, you'll see Moses holding 2 tablets of stone. And my wife showed that to Justice Scalia, and he decided he wanted it, and he had it hung in his chambers. This one is One Nation Under God. Kids sang the Pledge of Allegiance. And this one's called Christmas Cookies. It's two children, a boy and a girl, baking cookies and making a mess. This one is titled Pray for the Peace of Jerusalem. And I think that's something beautiful because it's spiritual and it's godly. And I don't know if you can see in the skies above, there's a dragon and an angel fighting, and there's a shofar being blown. And there's a spiritual battle over this city. And if you don't believe me, just stop and ask why it's so hard to name that's where we're going to put our embassy. There's a spiritual battle. And then this one is titled Jesse. That one and this one both won Artist of the Year in Keller 2 years in a row. My wife won, and this is just a little girl holding onto a bear. And we've used our art. We met President Trump, but there's Foster Friess and Justice Scalia up in the middle, on the top of the middle, and there's John Ashcroft and Glenn Beck with his painting. He acquired the Pray for the Peace of Jerusalem painting. And she's got a new project, and one it's titled March of the Deplorables. And she's just sketched it out here. We did an Indiegogo campaign, and that campaign has ended. It's all of the bikers and coal miners and housewives and mothers and veterans and everybody that decided that this country doesn't belong to Washington elites. It belongs to us. And they marched to Washington, being led by if you can see it right there, is the President and the First Lady, and Kellyanne Conway, and a few others that are in there. And so we want to take our country back. But I want to tell you the most important message that I can share with you from my heart is we better make this a better world, because I believe that Jesus is coming back. And I believe that the cashless society is all a part of that. And I believe that the one world government is forming, and I believe that all of these things are going on. Those are just signs to get ready. And those are reasons to get ready. And so this is the most important treasure to me, is preparing the way for the Lord. And to do that is by sharing the gospel with every creature. To go and love on people and to demonstrate that there's a way that's better. And so that's from my heart. And with that, I've shared with you an economic war room. The good, the bad, the good, and the beautiful. And I thank you very much. God bless you. I will take a few questions if you have them. Yes, sir.
Mr. Freeman, what's your opinion on, as far as both domestic and international organized crime and the Mexican cartels, how do you believe that they'll handle the monies, the transactions that they make from all their illegal activity? Currently, of course, we try to intercept bulk cash shipments that are all running south down towards Mexico. And, cash is the only way they operate because of the nature of what they do.
Sure.
What's your opinion about that?
I think they'll move to something like Bitcoin, or something where they can transfer cash. As long as cash is fungible and usable here, they'll find a way to exchange it for something else. They can move it into diamonds. There's so many different things that you can transfer it in. But yes, from a law enforcement standpoint, reducing or limiting cash would be a very helpful thing. But I think with every time that we increase our security, we run risk of giving up a piece of liberty. And so I think that they'll look for alternatives like Bitcoin. where they could go and put it in, or they'll put it in securities, or they'll try and adapt it some way. I don't know how. I don't think like they do, and I don't really focus on drug trafficking as an area, but money moves to where there's available. That's why we've seen Bitcoin in China just skyrocket in Japan, and we'll see them looking for alternatives like that.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yes, if you take away the blockchain and you take away the encryption, isn't Bitcoin a lot like auction rate securities, which kind of worked until they quit working?
It is. It's actually kind of like a Ponzi scheme if you take away the encryption, and it's a greater fool theory. Is well, I'm buying it because somebody else. People aren't buying that, except for the drug dealers, the terrorists, and some people in China. They're not buying it right now, this past week, because they want it to be a stable store of value that they'll be able to use in the future. People who do that, they'll buy prepaid debit cards and things like that. Those don't rise. You buy a prepaid debit card, which can have security in it, encryption and so forth, but those don't rise in value over a period of a week going up 100%. So they're buying it right now as a speculation, and that's why it's dangerous. You're up here in the front.
Okay, you indicated that if we can deposit our money in a bank, that the bank basically owns it, can do whatever they want to with it up to a certain point. Is that the same with savings and loans?
It is. In every case, that becomes from you hold a debt. The bank, you have loaned money to the bank, and the bank then, if they become insolvent, they will wipe it out. The advantage of like credit unions and other is if they don't have big derivatives exposure, or they're nearing insolvency, it's really not a bad thing. I mean, it works very well if the bank is not highly exposed, but some of the large banks in America are highly exposed to derivative. And that's what happened in 2008 is nobody knew, everybody hedged all their stuff, so they bought all of these derivatives, and they didn't know what they were worth. And when they sorted it all out, they had to figure out if the bank was solvent or insolvent. And looking back, Lehman Brothers has an argument they were solvent. They actually were, but in the panic, there was no way to tell. So one of the solutions for that is a local bank that doesn't play in the international financial markets. You sir over here.
If somebody wants to buy some Bitcoin with cash, who do they give the money to?
That's a fair question. I don't know. I've never bought Bitcoin. Somebody that I know that you mine Bitcoin, and I don't know if you know this. You have the answer to that?
Yeah, you can actually. There's a blockchain identifier that's unique. That if you lose it, it's gone forever. But you can actually physically trade a string of numbers in exchange for cash,
Right.
And then they turn around and add it to their own little Bitcoin wallet that's electronic. Once again, you lose that, you've lost all your Bitcoin. So
Right, and
there
the
is a lot of
Bitcoin
risk.
doesn't get hacked because of the encryption, but the wallets have gotten hacked. And if you put it down and you write it down somewhere, somebody can find it and steal it and have that string of numbers.
Yeah, there's some people that actually encode that on a physical coin, so it's permanent, and then they stick that into their safe.
But
So
where do you go to buy it? I know that's how you buy it, but where do you go? Who sells it?
I mean, you actually there's actually starting to be brokerages. The Vanderboss twins that were on Facebook, they have actually started a company that deals in Bitcoin exchanges. So they've started their own brokerage for that.
Is there an Ace Cash Express in Bitcoin? That is
I don't think they've gotten to that point yet. Yeah.
I think that's where we're getting. The question is there a physical place I can go right now here in the area and give them cash and get Bitcoin? That was your question, right? And I don't know the answer.
Some of the online exchanges they'll actually kind of help broker the exchange. If there's a buyer and seller on both sides, they take a small cut, and then they'll put you in contact with each other too. So
Who gives the money? I mean, who takes the money you give them?
it's different in every transaction. It's such a wild west. There's any number of ways that it can be done.
I mean, is there a place you go to hand them the cash?
You're physically handing it off to another person. So I mean, that's what it makes it great for all of these drug dealers, they can turn around and it's also a way to launder cash because they're taking legitimate cash in on one side and changing it to Bitcoin and then trading it for illegal cash on the other side.
Well, if it's gonna be a cashless society, the people that are selling the Bitcoins that get the cash, what do they do with it?
Well, at some point, they need to buy services, and there's not a lot of places that take Bitcoins right now, so.
You had a question, Mitch?
With the banks have a fractional banking system. I'm told that private life insurance companies are required to have 100% dollars backing up their policies. Is that your understanding? And in that regard, it would be some of the products they have would be a little more safer than a fractional banking system.
It's sort of yes, but no, in that insurance companies, we used to do business with New York Life as a company, and I would go and visit New York Life in the offices, and you'd meet a mid-level executive at New York Life. I wasn't seeing the CEO or whatever, and they'd have an office, this is an exaggeration, but basically this size in downtown New York. I'm like, how in the world? We own the building was the answer. No, they don't. The policyholders own the building. They invest it in real estate, they invest it in securities, they invest it, but yeah, it's matched to assets. But those assets may or may not be liquid. And there was a run on insurance companies that happened in 2008. Most people aren't aware. And they could have potentially gone under, insurance companies. And they didn't but there was this mark-to-market thing going on and they had to mark their assets. So yes, they're backed, but they're backed with assets, not with cash sitting in the bank or treasuries. How about on the side?
Is the Fed ever going to be audited?
They should be, shouldn't they? I have no idea, but they should be. I wish I could give you a better answer than you at the very back.
When I was in the military in the 90s, there was a push to put all the personal information on our 201 medical file on a chip and put that on our dog tags. And then, almost immediately, within a year, there was a push to not only take it from there because dog tags can be exchanged or damaged or lost, and to embed that actually in the skin of the service personnel in the military. And transition into Sweden or the Netherlands on a volunteer basis now, last I heard, people actually have their information, everything, on a chip embedded into their skin. And I'll tell you what, flag just went up immediately when I saw that news story. Any information you know about that?
I don't know anything specific about it, but I'll tell you a quick story. That sounds an awful lot like a mark, right? My friend is the chief investment officer of Wells Fargo. He's a great man. His name is Eric Davidson. His son's getting married in Waco this weekend. Baylor grad getting married in Waco, and I'll go see him at the wedding. But he told me once when we worked together at the Templeton organization, he said, Kevin, I'm so afraid I'm going to take the mark of the beast. I said, Eric, you're a Christian. You've read the book. You know that you're not supposed to take it. That's not a good thing. Why would you do it? He said, I'm just afraid. I said, Eric, you're smart enough. You know not to take it. He said, no. They won't call it the mark of the beast, and they'll probably offer frequent flyer miles with it. I'll just sign it. But that's where it's headed. That's where it's headed. You look back 2,000 years ago, a prophecy from an obscure prophet sitting on an island exiled, and you say, wow, this is really in line with what we're seeing happen today. Yes, sir.
What would happen if Congress actually killed Dodd-Frank?
The net effect, it would reduce the regulation and allow the economy to grow a little more.
Would the big banks start turning into little banks?
I don't know. That's a fair question, and I'm not one that has a fair answer for it. I apologize.
Do you think any of the banks are gonna, start implementing blockchain and start trying to organize their own currencies, or is there going to be national backing for blockchain type technologies?
Well, frankly, I think the blockchain should be used immediately in securities areas, just like Patrick Burns said. And I'll ask this question. Raise your hand again if you own stocks. Keep your hand up if you have the certificates.
Not all of them.
Very few people have their stock certificates. And so blockchain is ideal for keeping record of that. And then you have something tangible behind it and not just Bitcoin. Yes, sir.
I took these certificates physically one time, and I found out how hard it is to sell the stock when you want to sell it. If you do it that way.
You have to take it back in. and-
Well, you have to get it back, and then they have, it takes about an extra 5 days to get your sale at whatever the price is then.
Right, but
So
the
that's not an accident, though.
The problem with that is that our entire custody system, the Depository Trust Clearing Corporation, is built on a time and technology when we had bicycles running from brokerage firms from one to another to take actual certificates, and occasionally the bike would get a hit and they'd lose certificates or they'd get soiled or whatever, and so the system is designed to take anything in. And so if you sell something, whether you have it or not, it's called naked short selling. If you sell something and it gets taken in, the buyer doesn't know if it's real or fake or whatever, so they just kind of make it all real. And we have more outstanding shares on a lot of companies than there are actually issued shares. And the blockchain would allow us to really tamp that down and bring it into modern technology.
It sounds like that's akin to the fact that there's not as much physical gold out there as there are gold holders.
That's because central banks sell it and don't deliver it. Yeah,
So-
and central banks sell volatility. And central banks, they use this selling tool to manipulate the economy. But yes, you're right. It's called naked short selling of gold. And how many people own gold ETFs of one form or another? Like GLD, the exchange traded funds? How do you know that the gold is actually there? And it's not been hypothecated and rehypothecated. That's when Germany wanted to get their gold back from the Fed, and we gave them gold back, their gold back, and it took a long time, and it was we melted it down and recast it. Is what we told them. Like, just give me the exact gold I put in, give me that back. That's what I want. It's like, well, we thought it would be nice if we cleaned it up for you first. We melted it down and recast it. Since you, there's a serious concern that there's not all the gold. There should be there. Yes, sir.
What's your opinion on gold coins as insurance for the future?
I think gold is very important as a universally recognized value, as a means of exchange, as a hedge against paper money failures. There's so many good uses, but I want to caution you, I do not believe that gold is an investment. It's more akin to money than an investment. And the idea is, it rises and falls, but it used to be that a good man's suit was worth an ounce of gold, and 100 years later, a good man's suit was worth an ounce of gold. That's a property of money. It's not an investment. Investments produce something. You can buy land as an investment, but land can produce something. You can grow on it and so forth. So I love gold as a hedge. I love gold as a basis for a monetary system and a lot of other things, but I don't view gold as an investment personally. It could be a speculation, but I don't think it's an actual investment.
Do you use a local bank, and if so, which one?
I do. I have a couple of banking relationships, and Pegasus Bank is one that one of my clients is a part owner of, and that's one that I have. But I don't say it's better or worse than any other bank. I'm not endorsing, but they've been great to me. I love Pegasus Bank.
Are they involved in derivatives?
No, they're not. No. Yes, sir.
Mr. Freeman, you've mentioned many times this evening something X rises or falls in value, Bitcoin or gold or stock. Aren't you implicitly setting aside the dollar as something distinct from all these other commodities when in fact what's really happening is that there's an exchange ratio between two things, the dollar and a gold coin, or the Bitcoin and a security, or pick any other element, whether you want to call it money or not, and any other element. There's an exchange ratio between them. And so it seems as though you're really for some reason, I think all of us might do this because we're in America and the dollar is our currency. But when we say something rise or falling in value, that's
It's got to be relative to something.
yeah, that's a frame of mind that's just arbitrary.
I agree with that. Yeah, it's one that we commonly share, which is one of the benefits of money. And you know, even when the WannaCry virus happened, they said $300 worth of Bitcoin. They didn't say 1/6 of a Bitcoin. $300 worth of Bitcoin. So it is a common reference, but your point is fair and especially true. That's one of the reasons having the reserve currency of the world is beneficial, because it generally recognized around the world the value of the dollar. The downside of that is it allows us to borrow money that we shouldn't be borrowing. It's like, how wonderful, I'm giving you a credit card with a $100,000 limit on it. And you think, wow, I'm just out of college and I got a $100,000 limit. That's a blessing, but it's also a curse because you can go spend it. And having the reserve currency of the world is a blessing to us, but it's also a serious curse because it allows us to run up these massive debts that someday may wipe us out. So,
Our politicians would never do that.
pardon me?
Politicians would never do
Oh,
that.
very good. Yes, sir.
When you did your research for how well the countries were reducing the large denominations, did you come across Switzerland?
And tell me about Switzerland.
They have 1,000 franc notes, and their central bank says they have no plans to stop making it, and those are worth about $1,000 each.
So they're going to
over 60% of the value of their currency outstanding is in 1,000 franc notes. So people in Europe, instead of getting negative interest rates, they're getting 1,000 franc notes and putting them in Swiss safe deposit boxes. Because $1 million only like 3 inches high.
Which is one of the prime exports from Switzerland, is the ability to store anonymous money. And this may be another way to do it. So that's great. That's why they're not producing it, because they're going to stand apart. So that's great. Take one more. Yes, sir.
Would you agree that the value of anything is worth whatever someone else is willing to pay for it? Except for, obviously, you know, family heirlooms, because then there's an emotional attachment. The example I use is, we might have our favorite car and we think it's worth $10,000, but no one else is willing to pay more than $5,000. So what's the real value? The value of what someone will pay you in something for exchange, or your personal value in it?
Well, and that's true on the immediacy. At any given time, buyers and sellers determine the price of something, and it's always the marginal buyer and seller. But over the long term, the value can be determined by other factors, not just sentimental reasons. It can be adjustments to actual earnings and production of that asset. Or if you have an awareness of what buyers and sellers may be thinking a year from now, then and you realize that this particular moment's abnormal times, which is why mark-to-market was so dangerous. Today, buyers and sellers aren't valuing this, but I'm comfortable in a year from now they will value it. I'll give you an example. I bought a lot of Dom Perignon champagne in 1997 because I had an awareness that by the year 2000 there would be a lot more bottles uncorked. And so I was a buyer of that. I have a neighbor who bought a lot of vehicles in 2008 when the economy was collapsing, and he happened to have the wherewithal and financial capability. He bought a lot of, he said, that's a $50,000 car. Actually, it's a $150,000 car. And at the auction, nobody has any cash and everybody's running away scared. So he was able to pick it up for half of what he believed. So there's a long run value. And then there's an immediate. But the price of something is set generally by what buyers and sellers are, absent government interference, by what buyers and sellers are willing to pay at that particular moment.
Right. So based upon economics, supply and demand create a price. Marginal revenue versus marginal cost give you another price factor to it. So there's a lot of factors in it, but ultimately it comes down to what someone is willing to take that value they have, whether it be money or a commodity to trade, versus something else.
True, in the short run, and in the longer run, people can look foolish, because I had an ice cream candy store and there was a desperate demand for Beanie Babies. And so I was a net seller of Beanie Babies, and oh, this is gonna be worth $1,000 or $10,000. I'm gonna put my kid through college with this Princess Beanie Baby, and of course, it's not worth it much of anything. And then sometimes they come back. Baseball cards, everything is determined. And smart people who have some visual understanding of what the supply and demand is going to look like at some point in the future can capitalize on that. And they're able to separate the human emotion. And my business, John Templeton was my teacher, my business, investment management, is built on that idea. That you're not recognizing the value today, but that there will be value tomorrow or at some point in the future.
Thank you.
So you're right. So anyway, God bless you all. Thank you so much.